Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world, whether you're watching live or on YouTube on Catch Up. Welcome to today's session. This is another in our third season of FIPP Insider webinars. Now, over the last couple of years, we've been paying particular attention to one of the most welcome trends in our industry, which is, of course, paid content. Paywalls and digital subscriptions have been growing like wildfire across the world, and we have examples of success in almost every country you can think of. You can see many of those in our quarterly digital subscription snapshot, of course. Now, this has gone some way to replacing the revenue lost both to the big tech giants in digital advertising and as a result of the long-term decline of many people's print revenue streams. But there remains an important gap in this space, which is the ability to buy individual articles or pieces of content. Now, micropayments, which has long been touted as the solution to this problem, it's of course the ability for an individual customer to buy an individual piece of content, seems such a logical and necessary element in a content provider's digital experience. But all of the recent attempts to make this work have been unsuccessful, or largely unsuccessful, hampered by a variety of factors. Well, I'm delighted to say that our guests today from FIPP think they found the answer to this. Their new approach to the opportunity of micropayments promises much, and they're going to tell us all about it in a few moments. But before I introduce my guests, a little bit of housekeeping as usual. This session is very much a conversation between myself and my guests, so please don't hesitate to make yourself part of it. Ask questions using the Q&A tab below, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. Chat to the other guests and presenters using the chat button. We'd love to hear from you. Also keep an eye on the chat box because we will post interesting and useful links from FIPP in there as well. I'd like to thank all of our FIPP members, some of whom are on this call today. A reminder that soon our content is going behind our membership wall. This project has already kicked off and will be live soon. So if you don't want to miss out on the fantastic range of content and insight that we produce, as well as taking advantage of our networking services, make sure you join FIPP today. And you can do that in writing, by writing to me, at james@fipp.com, and you'll shortly be able to do that as well on the website. Now, a reminder also that today's session is being recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, hello and welcome. The channel is called FIPP World. So if you want to view this again, if you want to share it with people after the event, or if you want to check out the library of fantastic video content that we have on there, please head over to YouTube once the session has finished. I would also recommend you head to fipp.com to sign up for our newsletter so that you don't miss any of the great content and insight that we produce. But it's now time for me to get on with the show and introduce my guest for today. But before I do that, I'm just going to show you a very short video that explains what FIPP does, just to give some context to today's discussion.
So, you're a publisher providing premium content. Like most publishers, your ad revenue is most likely shrinking. You might have a large international audience, but fewer subscribing. To convert your audiences from casual visitors to loyalists, you need fast micropayments. Pay per article bridges the gap between ads monetization and subscriptions. Introducing FIPP, a micropayments wallet with which visitors can pay any publisher across the FIPP global network. We allow publishers to collect cross-border micropayments at zero fixed fees. It's easy to integrate, assures higher revenue than ads, and incremental revenue from your non-subscribers. FIPP tracks who buys, which article, and at what price. This data helps you with better audience monetization and precise content pricing. It's time you start maximizing revenue from your global audience. Welcome to FIPP.
So there we go, a very quick and short introduction to FIPP, and the founders of FIPP are with us today to talk about the service. So Abhishek and Dushyant, welcome. Welcome to FIPP Insider. Thank you very much for joining us. You need to come off mute now, chaps, so that everybody can hear you.
Thank you. By the way, I'm Dushyant. I think both of our name tags on Zoom say Abhishek. So I'm Dushyant and the other guy is Abhishek.
Yeah, just in case anybody just in case anybody's confused, we haven't got two people called Abhishek on here today. So, gents, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for that quick and easy explanation, which has saved my first question, asking everybody to tell for you to tell them what few cents is. I think we all understand that. But what I'm interested in is your motivation for starting the business. Do you come from a media background? Do you have a background in technology or finance? What's motivated you to get involved in this area of the media business?
I'll go first. So my background is I come from the ad tech space. I sold my last company, which was solving the advertiser's problem. But having been in that space for a long time, the one thing that I realized is that at the end of the day, our programmatic ads are being served on publisher sites. And that got me thinking a bit, that isn't it kind of sad that publishers have all this newsroom and great content to drive traffic to their site, and the only way that revenue comes in is when people leave that site by clicking the ad, right? And that oxymoron or that dichotomy was something that I wanted to solve, but until this year we didn't get around to doing that. So I left my last role to start Few Cents to solve exactly this problem. Now, the good thing is that reader revenue became more fashionable during COVID, precisely because the ad revenues were not holding, or being sustainable anymore. And that's what motivated me to jump full time into this and build the solution to monetize content directly. Right. So my background is art style.
For you, Dushyant?
Yeah, so my background is a little bit different, but similarly a lot of overlap in the ad tech space. So, I mean, I've been working for 21 plus years, but 13 of those have been at Google, where I left recently in August to join Few Cents. At Google, what I was doing was I was leading our partnerships business in India and Southeast Asia, and a huge chunk of that was working with some of the largest publishers in the region, helping them make money through ads through the Google the ad tech stack, as well as helping them with other Google products like search, YouTube, etc., to help them grow their user base. So I'm very, very acutely aware of the challenges that publishers are facing, especially in the ad space, and the challenge of declining RPMs or the yield that they're getting from ads, and their need for taking control of the user and taking control of their own destiny as far as revenue is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like a good combination of skills and experience there. And Abhishek, you've put up there on the screen a little bit of an explainer. Just tell us a little bit about the concept in a bit more detail and how it fits into the publisher's business model.
Yeah, I think Dushyant will walk us through that.
Yeah, so I think as Abhishek mentioned in his intro, we've seen that for publishers, there are two basic business models that are there today. One is the subscription business and one is the ads business. Now, if you look here on this graph, right, on the x-axis, think of that as any publisher's total online audience. And on the y-axis, you see the revenue per user or RPM or ARPU or whatever metric that you use to measure yield. Now, if you think of subscriptions, even the most successful large digital publisher has not been able to garner too many or a high percent of their users as subscribers. On average, there are various reports that outline this, but on average, roughly around 5% of any given publisher's users actually end up subscribing. Some have a little bit higher, some have none at all, right? Depending on the publisher. So that leaves 95% of the users left to monetize. And how do publishers monetize those? That's through ads. Now, the difference is that obviously subscriptions have a very, very high revenue per user ARPU metric, right? But the ads piece actually has super low yields. And that yield actually has been secularly declining even before COVID. COVID just kind of added a massive acceleration to that decline. So more and more now, publishers are struggling. And that leaves a massive gap between the revenue per user between subscriptions and ads. And this is exactly where few cents, we as few cents feel there's a massive opportunity. Now you dig a little deeper, and what you see over here is, we've gone through various research reports, and even anecdotally, it makes sense. There's a pretty big section of users who will never pay anything for any content.
Yeah.
It's just either they don't feel there's enough value, or they don't have the money, or it's just a philosophical thing that they just won't do, right? And based on different reports, we peg that number to be around 40 to 50% of all readers who will never pay. That still leaves a big divide between those 5% who will subscribe and that 40 to 50% who will never pay. So that's again about a 45% of the user base who are willing to pay something, but they just haven't found the right model. They haven't found the right value or the right convenience for them to actually part with their money. And this is exactly the point where few cents feels that micropayments, if done right, has a large role to play and can actually be a much higher ARPU or RPM source than ads can, and somewhere close enough to subscriptions, but not as high as subscriptions. We can definitely add a massive incremental revenue source for publishers.
So let's be clear for everybody at home. This is a potential third revenue stream beyond your straightforward monthly subscription and your advertising, and you don't particularly need to give up either of those other revenue streams in order to take this on. Is that right?
That's right. So when it comes to ads, you're still showing ads. It's just that you're allowing a user to pay 20 cents, 30 cents to access a piece of content, but the ads can still be shown. So there's very negligible impact on your ads views. And then even on the subscription side, based on how you segment your audience, you can choose to show a micropayments option alongside subscriptions, or after you've shown subscription and the user hasn't, taken the bait, or even after the user churns, right? So these people are likely not to subscribe. So it's almost all incremental revenue that comes to you through micropayments.
So this is a new branch in your subscription decision tree that comes after you've tried to market some of the other options to them. Okay, that makes perfect sense. And speaking as a company that's going through installation of a paywall ourselves, that absolutely makes sense. So I'm going to ask you, and you're showing the answer there, but I'm going to ask you the classic business strategist's question that they would ask in a meeting with you, which is, that there's a gap in the market, but what evidence have you got that there is a market in that gap? So tell us a little bit about this work that you've done.
So before we go into the survey, and Abhishek, I'll ask you to just go back up one slide so people don't get distracted by the data on that slide. I think just anecdotally, right? If you think of your own user experience, how many times have you clicked on a link that's shared to you on email or on LinkedIn or through some social media? It could be an interesting article you want to read. You click on it, you go to the website, only to be blocked by a paywall that says you need to subscribe, right? And what's the next thing you're likely to do? You will shut that window because you already have enough subscriptions. It's not about not being able to afford it. It's that you just only want so many subscriptions. If you look at the Reuters report, they peg the average subscriptions per person at around 1, slightly above 1, and you're competing with the video streaming sites of the world, the music streaming sites of the world as well. It's not just news. So if you think about it, if I was to come on that paywall which says, hey, pay $10 to subscribe, or pay 30 cents to just read this article, there's probably a decent amount of people who would say, okay, 30 cents, that's not much. If it's very easy for me to do, I'm going to do it, right? So that's really the user kind of intent that we feel. That's our hypothesis that this is where we can make a business. Now let's go to the survey. So what we did was we surveyed about 400 users across 8 different countries, a mix of both developing and developed markets. The first graph you see on the top left basically was asking the question, are you willing to pay small amounts, around 30 cents or so, to access a piece of content? Is it a simple yes or no answer? And you can see it's pretty much consistent across the board that the vast majority of users across countries and across age groups, if you look at the bottom left, are willing to pay. What's not surprising also is that countries like India, where paying large sums is probably tougher, or people are against it. There's a higher propensity, but even in developed markets, I think people see the value. And if you look at age groups, it's fairly consistent. The highest being between 25 to 34. That could be A, that they're more comfortable paying online, and B, they have the money to do it, right? And then we also looked at a couple of other things. One was, what type of content would you be willing to pay for? So the good news for most publishers is that news actually was quite high. We felt we were a little surprised by that. But then if you kind of split it out by gender, food, drinks, health, fitness rank high with women, and with men there's more local news and sports, which they find more valuable. And then the last piece, which is something I feel that is our, as FewCents, our real strength, is really the form of payment. So anybody who has had experience with e-commerce or selling anything online will tell you that it's all good to have a great product that somebody wants to buy online, but it's almost as important, if not more, to have the access or ability to pay for it in the form that you're comfortable, right? So most companies, just put up, for example, the ability to pay by cards. But even in developed markets, only 44% of people actually prefer using cards. The rest actually mostly like online, and then some portion like wallets. And in the developing markets, again, not a surprise, there's a higher percentage of users who prefer paying by wallet. And what we've seen also in our experiments so far is that wallets and online banking is much more popular. So even the ability to pay through an instrument that you're comfortable with is super important when it comes to micropayments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated by that payment options piece. We're going to come on to that in a minute. And I think publishers maybe have forgotten the different attitudes towards different payment methods in different parts of the world. And that question of wallets is a really fascinating one that we're going to talk about in a minute. Now, I mentioned in the introduction, micropayments have been tried quite a few times in the past. Where do you think those efforts have gone wrong, and what are you doing to address that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few aspects to micropayments. Well, one is obviously that there is a fixed cost component to every wallet, right? Where if you think about a direct transaction which happens through a payment gateway, there is a fixed fee component to every transaction. And that fixed fee almost always makes that micropayment not worthwhile. As a net, the publisher ends up making less money or negative balance. So in essence, what micropayments needs for sure is a wallet, because the wallet is able to absorb or aggregate the transactions in one place, right? And that allows the wallet to get rid of the fixed piece and only charge a variable component, and allows the publisher to make a margin. But wallets have their own challenge, where the wallets are typically controlled or governed by payment regulation acts in each country, because you're holding people's money in your wallet. So effectively, it's like a bank, not as regulated as a bank, but essentially you owe people that money.
Yeah.
So almost every country has their own payment regulations act. And by virtue of FewCents being a wallet domiciled in Singapore, we get access to 52 currencies where we can hold virtual wallets. So micropayments equals wallets effectively. And if you think about the control aspect, micropayments typically allow users a lot of convenience, but at the same time, publishers are looking for a lot of control. So if you think about people who have tried micropayments before, you would see Blendle would come up all the time. But effectively, Blendle is an aggregator which syndicates news across multiple sites on their own app. So it is not as if the micropayments part didn't work. but it is the aggregation part which didn't work. And in that case, as a publisher, you don't get to see your audience. You don't control your audience. You don't know who's reading what piece of content. You just get a rev share from the aggregator. So what you need is a combination of micropayments, but at the same time, you need for that to work like PayPal. So it needs to embed itself inside the publisher site so that the publisher has full control over their audience. So in the past, when we say micropayments hasn't worked, the large majority of the publisher ecosystem is thinking about Blender. Yeah. But it is not that micropayments didn't actually work. It is largely that the aggregation, the missing gaps in the content that Blender has, or any of the aggregators have, and the ability to know who your audience is. That is the part that didn't quite work.
Yeah, and I think this is a really crucial point to emphasize, this combination. I think firstly, the reason I was so intrigued to have you guys on was that you've really approached this from a fintech point of view as much as anything else, which I think has really been missing in efforts previously. And I think many of our audience will have heard of Blendle, but maybe not experienced it. I think you've explained it very well there, that aspect of publisher control. This few cent solution can go onto your site, and you control the experience and you control the user journey, and you're giving the user that convenience. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So, you see a few subscription paywall service providers. They allow you a lot of control as a publisher. Yeah. But they're not solving the fintech, the cross-border movement of micropayments problem. So we are layering that control layer with the fintech layer, which is the cross-border movement of money across multiple currencies. And
we should emphasize as well that this is aimed primarily at B2C publishers who've got an enormous amount of content for which they're charging a very small price. This is not about B2B publishers who might be charging £100 or £1,000 for a report, because then the processing fee aspect is less important. That was something that came out in our preparation call, and I think is very important. And now I think it's really helpful for our audience if you could talk us through what the experience looks like from a user point of view. So just tell us about the kind of user journey.
Yeah, so as a user, what you would experience is something that you see on this slide. So as a publisher, you would embed few cents inside your article, inside your content. And this could be podcast, it could be, any form of content. But essentially, you're embedding few cents JavaScript inside your website. And that allows few cents to lock that content. And that is when the user sees few cents for the first time. And that is at a point where the intent is quite high. So the probability to pay 30 cents, so this is in Singapore. So as a user, I would see Singapore cents. But if the user is in the US, they would see the price in USD. And globally, people would see price in their respective currencies. So the motivation to quickly sign on and pay this, if the experience is seamless, the intent is so high that it almost always, works. Right. So what we have seen is roughly, 7 to 8% of the times people end up, unlocking content.
And you're going to come on in a minute to give us a real world example of this. One quick question that I have: does this work with any content type? Is it can it only work with flat content? Can it do audio and video as well?
Yeah. So as we started a couple of months ago, we saw a lot of demand coming in from sites that have podcasts. And there is no real or proven way to monetize podcasts yet. So, we quickly rushed to build a solution which embeds inside the audio player itself. And as soon as the user hits a certain limit, let's say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever that threshold is, it locks the audio, and few cents paywall again comes up for the user to pay. And as soon as the payment is made, the audio unlocks itself and the user continues with the podcast. So audio, video works the same way, but we also work with files. where we can restrict downloads of files. In fact, one of our largest publishers is using reports, $5, $2 reports quite effectively with few cents.
Yeah, you're going to come on to some examples of usage in a minute. Just tell us about how this fits into the tech ecosystem for a publisher.
Yeah. So for a publisher, there are multiple areas that a publisher wants to solve for all at the same time, and there are different players who are solving different problems. However, FewCents is a combination of few different pillars. So the first and foremost is user convenience. So FewCents sits on the publisher site. It's a paywall that sits there, and it's very easy to use for the user. Price is always in local currency, and it's a single login that works across multiple publishers. So the local currency part is what differentiates us with a few of our competitors. Most of our competitors are largely playing in USD, Euro, or GBP, but we are serving audiences across the world. And in that case, local currency wallets are super important. So that user convenience is where FewCents is probably one of the few players. The second is, the traditional paywall service providers or subscription service providers, where they allow a lot of control to the publisher. You can embed the paywall with a few lines of code. It works on any CMS system. It allows the publisher to place the paywall based on some logic. So there's a tremendous flexibility where and when to show the paywall. And then obviously customization and co-branding are key elements of publisher control. So, Piano does that really well, but, we match that. And geofencing is one thing that we do exceptionally well, where we are able to lock or not show our paywall in certain geographies if the publisher doesn't want to. So, for example, there are publishers we have that say that, hey, we want to not touch our domestic market for micropayments, but we only want to monetize our international audience for micropayments because they are not going to subscribe with us. So they can keep the audience pools completely exclusive by geofencing. The third layer is fintech, where cross-border micropayments, taking care of the regulatory burden of wallets, etc., which is done well by pure play fintech guys, but we do that very well. And the fourth layer is audience data. So just like Google Analytics or Chartbeat is capturing who's coming, consuming what content, we are doing the same, but we have this element of price. At what price are people locking or not unlocking? So the propensity to pay is another element that we capture with which a few others might not. So it's a combination of four pillars that makes FewCents stand out.
I have a question here from the audience relating to this from Marcus Schobel. Thank you very much, Marcus, for watching and for your question. He's asking, do publishers using FewCents get access to the data of those users who actually paid for their content?
Yes, and also users who don't pay for that content. As long as the user is on a publisher site, the publisher owns the user as much as FewCents has access to that data.
Right.
So the publisher has access to that data, and it's sitting on the edge, which means our API can inject that data into your existing analytics system in real time.
Okay, so that can go into a Salesforce or whatever is necessary for people to then retarget them.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Now, we asked this question earlier, but I think you've got a better example of it. When I asked the question of whether using FewCents means that you have to give up some of your other revenue in digital subscriptions and advertising. What's your view on that in more detail, please?
So,
yeah, Dushyant, go ahead.
No, so as I mentioned earlier, both on the ad side and the subscription side, it's very, I guess the way to put it is that almost all of your revenue that you get through micropayments will be incremental. Now, there may be slight fall in advertising revenue because when you hit the paywall, there may be some people who don't go further than that and therefore don't engage with the page. but the ads are still showing around the paywall, right? So there's some amount of reduction, but mostly it's fairly negligible based on what we've seen so far. And then again, on the subscription side, you have to remember what most publishers' subscription journey has been quite interesting. If you actually talk to them, and I'm sure many publishers would have experienced this, that when they first go on the journey, there's usually a honeymoon phase where you're getting a growth in subscribers, but you very soon hit a plateau. You hit that plateau, and then you start to experience churn. That could be because the promotional period is over. It was cheap for the first few months, and then you raise the price or what have you, or maybe the user feels they're not getting enough value in terms of they don't consume so much content on your site, maybe 1 or 2 articles, so it doesn't make sense for them. So from that point of view, it's a very good channel to target those churned users who are starting to churn but still make reader revenue out of it. So I mean, you can see in this is just an illustrative example. You have your RPM from ads, the micropay, and I'll take you through a live example right after this. But the RPM that you get from few cents is actually in orders of magnitude higher. So even if your total ads revenue is decreasing by 10%, 15%, what you're gaining is 10x. So it's negligible in terms of the cannibalization on the ad side, and similarly on the subscription side, because subscriptions, there's a lot of churn, as I mentioned, and most of your users are not subscribing anyway, right? So maybe what I can do is I can just talk through an example of one of our publishers, who was our first publisher from Indonesia. So Daily Social is, it's a niche technology publisher in Indonesia. They have users all over the world. Their main users are in Indonesia, the US, and Singapore. So if you look at this, when we first were talking to them, their first reaction was, we're a niche publication, but I don't think anyone's going to pay for my content. I don't believe that, right? And secondly, they said, look, most of our users are in Indonesia, and it's a developing market. I don't think the willingness to pay is very high in Indonesia, so this is just not going to work. But luckily their CEO is of an experimentation bent of mind, so he's like, what the hell, let's try it. So if you think about it, every publisher has, let's say, X number of page views. Now, not every piece of content is something that users will be willing to pay for, right? It will be some percent of this which is considered premium or considered valuable enough for a user to actually pay even a few cents for, right? So let's assume with Daily Social, what happened was they started with 1% of their total traffic coming to a few cents, right? Of that, about 7%, close to 7% of users actually signed up to few cents to be able to unlock, right? And of that, 3.1% actually unlocked on credit. So we do give a credit for the first article. And then 0.3% of users ended up topping up again. Now, what this means in the end, in the ads world, right? In Indonesia, roughly an ad unit on average earns about 10 to 12 cents, anywhere between 10 to 12 cents per 1,000 impressions. Much lower than what it is for many of the European publishers. But, whatever it is in Europe, let's say it's 30 cents, 40 cents. In Indonesia, that number is 10 cents. With few cents, that number became $5. This is $5 of people who actually topped up, paid, and this is revenue that actually comes in for the publisher, right? So in this case, it's 50x. Now, let's say that, over time, this may come down. Even if it comes down to $4, $3, it's a huge multiple in terms of 10 cents versus $5, right? So I think that kind of is where we got our first real boost of encouragement that, look, it works, and it works in a developing market like Indonesia.
Yeah, where you wouldn't expect it would work, but you expect this to be a developed market solution. I think that's a very surprising development.
Yeah. And then the second part, James, which is what our hypothesis was that the form of payment is very important. So since most of the users were coming from Indonesia and then some from Singapore, Singapore's it's a developed market, but there's wallets. People like using wallets in Singapore as well. 71% of the entire payment amount actually came through local wallets. Now, when you look at just the payments made from the US, they came primarily through cards. But the largest was wallets, followed by online banking, followed by cards. Right? So that's why our hypothesis that your payment method and the ability to pay in your local currency is super important, as important as the value or the quality of the content. Right? And then lastly, I think, obviously seeing the success, Daily Social is keen to increase the traffic that is exposed to FiewCents. But because they're now seeing a lot of users, and this goes back to the participant who's asking about data sharing, right? So they're able to see which users are actually coming back again and again. And for those, they're now building a subscription product, and they're going to target those users first, right? Because they seem to be loyal users, so they'll give them some kind of nice promotional offer to join. So it also actually helps you identify those users who have a higher propensity to subscribe, so it can actually add to your subscription pool.
Can I just ask you something there? One, it was David De Boer is asking, relating to this, a question. Yeah. Thank you, David, for your question. Whether you can explain more about the UX element, the seamless user convenience regarding the login. And he's saying that online readers already log in to read our content, the content that he publishes. Do they need to perform a second login to be able to pay for a premium content article facilitated by FiewCents?
Abhishek, you want to?
Yeah, so we have a single sign-on capability where we assume, or we take the same identity of the logged in user of the publisher.
Right.
So if the user is already logged into the publisher, our paywall is flexible enough, and our APIs will collect that data and create a FiewCents user automatically. So the user doesn't need to log in twice. And it could be the reverse way as well. So as long as the publisher is able to integrate our APIs, if a user has signed into FiewCents, we can automatically help the publisher log in the user on their CMS as well.
Okay, fantastic.
And I'll underline that is all with permission from the user.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, taking into account data privacy and all that. So, David, I hope that answers your question. Dushyant, anything else you want to say about this Daily Social example?
No, I mean, I think one interesting area which we quite didn't expect that seems to be quite popular is, so Daily Social has a few of these reports because they're niche technology. They have a few reports once in a while. So they're selling them at like $5 on a report. And that seems to be doing really well. That was something that people could download for free. So I know many publications have reports that, they may be giving for free or for, low amounts in terms of dollar value. And so this is something that that could work well as on top of just regular articles or podcasts or videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll quickly add one more point. You had mentioned that business publications is something that might not work so well, but what we are seeing, especially in marketing magazines, people who put out reports for marketing, typically the likes of Business Insider, etc. If that report itself can be unbundled with key concepts, then you can sell it piecemeal, even at a retail level.
Yeah.
So just as an example, as a business owner, I am constantly searching for site traffic of my publishers. And there are enough sites and services that provide that. But if I were to buy a report, it's usually $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
However, on a per query basis, if I want to just check someone's traffic as a business user, I can unlock that piece of content or just that data point for $1, and I would happily pay that as a business user. I don't even have to get a corporate credit card for that.
Yeah.
So we are seeing use cases evolve around business magazines and reports as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just talk about onboarding, the crucial kind of element here. If there are publishers out there that might be thinking of trialing FewCents, what do they need to do to start working with the software?
So first and foremost, the most important thing is to have a hypothesis.
Mm.
That let's have a plan for which kind of content we will be putting behind FewCents to try. And what we have seen is, there is content which most publishers think is, just mass content, but maybe it's not. There are pieces of content which are very specific to every publisher. So we've seen, reports, archives working really well, and then evergreen content, which has a long tail of traffic where people keep coming back. So essentially, any piece of content which has a shelf life of more than 1 day is worth monetizing via FewCents, right? So that's the first thing to keep in mind during onboarding. And obviously, the second thing is that having an experimentation mindset, the ability to optimize language, test the price points for different categories of content, play with the text. Just like in ad tech, the copy means everything.
Yeah.
And the placement means everything. The color, everything can make a difference. So have that experimentation mindset and a data-oriented mindset. Let data drive the decision making, not so much the gut feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in terms of onboarding, it's fairly simple. It's roughly a 3 to 7 day process. It's as simple as plugging in our tag on your website, and then controlling everything else from the publisher dashboard that we provide.
Yeah.
Give it a week, give it a month, 3 months, experiment with the data, play with price points, etc., and then it's just dialing up from that point forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can control your price by category, by article. You can have certain geographies enabled, certain not. So there's a lot of control given to publishers. And once the tags are there, even someone who's on like the business team or the editorial team can control it. So you don't need to have that technical expertise to keep experimenting.
Yeah, absolutely. That looks very simple and very quick. I think that's very encouraging for everybody who's on this call. Well, gents, we're nearly out of time. We've spent nearly 45 minutes talking so far, which is fantastic, and I think we've got a great overview. Before we close, though, I'd like you to just give me a quick summary. What are the kind of 3 key get rights for micropayments for publishers?
I'd say there are 4, and those are the 4 pillars that has been the recipe for our success. First and foremost is user convenience and experience.
Yeah.
So if publishers trying to do it themselves, it's akin to having subscription everywhere, and hence the user is not so keen. So having a unified login across multiple publishers is super critical from the user experience point of view. So a unified wallet or a third-party wallet is important in this thing. Second is control. The more flexibility a publisher has to control the placement, the look and feel, the pricing of the paywall, and the data that comes with that, that is very important. Fintech is that layer which is missing across the board, is very important. Local payment methods, local currency, conversion of micropayments across borders, regulations around wallets, all that fintech layer is critical, and that leads into user experience as well, because people like their local currency. And the data layer, which is the ad tech/audience layer, the ability to see who is paying for what or not paying for what, from which geography and at what price. So these 4 or 5 pieces of metadata: who, what, when, at what price, that data collection is very important to scale up this operations. Now, the fifth thing that is coming around is, what we are seeing is that typically there are silos in publishers. So the marketing team is promoting an altogether different content. The editorial team is thinking that this content will work really well for paid. And then the business team is, selling ads for something else. So our data has been able to unite different aspects of the publisher business. So that mindset to work together at the end of the day is important for micropayment success.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Abhishek, Dushyant, thank you very much for that really fascinating overview of an exciting new technology. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank
you for having us.
Now, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that? Just maybe you want to pop back up on screen your little contact details thing there.
Yeah.
You can see.
It's sales@fewcents.co.
Sales@fewcents.co. Okay, there we go. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Sales@fewcents.co, and you're at fewcents.co for your website, and you can go and have a look at that. Okay, fantastic. So I hope you've all written that down. I'll stop that screen share. If you could stop that screen sharing again for me, just so I can wrap up.
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. Well, listen. Thank you very much, everybody, who came on the call today. Really appreciate you joining us. Just a reminder that if you haven't already done so, that you can sign up to our newsletter. You can do that at FIPP.com. I'm just going to put the other chaps on mute. There we go. So a reminder that you can sign up to the newsletter at FIPP.com, and also that our video of today's session will appear on YouTube. The YouTube channel is FIPP World. You can go on there and see both this video and previous ones as well from this series. Our next webinar will be on the same topic, on paid content, with Zephyr on the 10th of December at 1400, 2 p.m. UK time. There'll be a link in the email that you'll get to sign up for that session as well. And we hope to see you all there. But in the meantime, from me, from Dushyant, from Abhishek, thank you very much for watching, and see you again next time. Goodbye.